Excellent. Good morning, Arizona. I had to remember where I was. It's time for you to rewrite your life. That means to start life over every morning and be your very best self. And I'm so glad. Thank you, Karen Pomroy of Equine Voices, for showing up. Tell us, when I asked you for help on how to run a horse rescue, I had no idea that you had the largest equine and sanctuary rescue in Arizona. Tell us about your place and what you
Well,
do.
yeah, so I started it in 2004, basically on a wing and a prayer after I backpacked around the world for 18 months, and it changed my life. And I got involved with a wild horse sanctuary in California, and long story short, I ended up rescuing, I had my rescue horse and another one when I still lived in Santa Maria, California, and then I rescued Gulliver and 3 other PreMarin foals. In 2004, they were 11 months old and they were going to slaughter. And then it was after that that I decided to do more for the animals than just have 6 horses. And so one thing led to another, and it's been quite a journey. We're celebrating our 20th year this year, which is hard to believe. I never thought that I would be here today saying this, but we've rescued hundreds of lives, and thankfully Gulliver and the other 3 are still with us. They're 20, I guess they're 21 this year, so they're getting up there in age. And we've deviated from the PreMarin industry because the drug PreMarin is now being manufactured in China, not in the US or in Canada any longer. And what they do is they use the pregnant mare's urine to make the drug, so women, when they go through menopause, and it's very dangerous to women and it's very dangerous to the horses. And so, but because most of the factory farms are in China now, we've opened up our doors to Mustangs and a lot of older horses, abuse cases. We take some very, very hard cases here. So that's kind of where we're at this point. Our mission has changed a little bit, but it's still the same. I mean, I still educate women about the drug and how dangerous it is. And but as far as rescuing PreMarin mares, it's a little more difficult because they're not in the US anymore. So
Okay. I wasn't sure exactly what your relationship with the PreMarin drug was. As a nutritionist and a health coach, I definitely warn women against those kind of productions of dangerous estrogens that can have serious side effects. And so please don't support that. And I really appreciate you. Could you tell me, could you explain how you rescued the horses in relation to the PreMarin production?
So Gulliver and Spanky and Bella induced were the original 4. And I received a phone call from a gal that was trying to help 7 babies because that particular farm in North Dakota went out of business. And so there were 7 babies left that needed a home. And I was only going to take 1. And a friend of mine was going to take another. Well, I ended up with 4 out of the 7. And Gulliver was my 4th one because they said he was big and ugly. He's a big Clydesdale cross. And I always say he's not big and ugly, he's big and beautiful.
He's
And
so beautiful. Is
he's so
that the
beautiful.
horse that's on the picture that I posted? Is that
Yes.
Oliver? Oh,
Yes.
he's adorable. He looks so happy.
He's amazing, and he became our mascot because he's so unique and he's a gentle giant. And so I ended up rescuing him. He was the 4th one, and it wasn't until after the fact that I decided to start the nonprofit because I feel like we all have a purpose in life, and I feel like I'm so blessed that I found my purpose in life, coming from the corporate world, being unfulfilled. This is definitely my purpose. And I just feel so blessed that I went out to the corral one day and I said, Gulliver, we can do so much more for the PreMarin horses. And I filed for my 501c3, and here we are 20 years later. It's pretty magical, actually.
Well, what happens to the horses when they're used for the production of the pregnant mare urine used to produce this dangerous form of estrogen? What happens to the horses afterwards that they need to be rescued?
So basically, the process is they're kept in confined stalls day in and day out with a collection cup attached to the back of them. They're not trained. They're just in a stall with this collection cup. And what the pharmaceutical company wants, or the farmers want, is the estrogen from the urine. And so they have to be pregnant. So they impregnate them year after year after year. The babies tend to go to slaughter. They're untrained, and there's an excess of babies. So one of the farms that I worked with had over 1,000 mares in they call it the P line, producing babies year after year after year. So you can imagine how many horses, are born that there's really not enough homes for. So they would end up at the auctions because they use a lot of the draft crosses because they collect more urine. They make more money by the pound for the meat, which gets usually shipped abroad for human consumption. When the mares can no longer get pregnant, then they get sent off to the slaughterhouse, to auctions into the slaughterhouse. So that's their life. And if you know anything about horses, they're freedom animals. For them to be confined in a stall too small to lay down and, attached to a collection cup it's a death sentence to them, basically. So that's always been their lives. And so when I found out about the industry, I just was horrified that this is how these horses are being treated. And
I
that's
did
why
not know
Mhm.
about that.
And that's why after I rescued Gulliver and the other three, I decided to start the nonprofit and really, not only help the animals, but educate, because so many women are taking the drug and they have no idea where it's coming from.
Right. Okay. And you brought up something really huge here, kind of an aside. You said you backpacked after you backpacked around the world and it changed your life. This it kind of causes me to suspect about a form of awareness here that I often have debates with many other coaches and many other celebrities about our mindfulness about the world. Tell me about that, please. How did backpacking around the world change your life and affect you finding your purpose, which is huge?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm getting chills as we're speaking. I believe that if you have an open mind and an open heart, everything's a stepping stone to get you to where you're destined to be. That's just my philosophy, and actually, I'm living proof of that. So I was living in California, and my roommate and I were pretty sick of our corporate jobs, and so we decided to to plan this backpacking trip and third world countries, $10 a day budget.
Wow.
And this was in 1994, so it was quite a few years ago. And she ended up getting engaged. Well, we were supposed to go to backpack together for a year, and 6 months in, her boyfriend met her in Turkey and proposed to her in front of the Blue Mosque. So she went back to California. So I backpacked another year by myself, and I went
Wow.
to places like India and Turkey and Thailand, and I spent 11 days of silence at a monastery in Thailand. Just things like that just changed my life. How people just that, it just made me realize we're all connected, but we live such different lives. And I spent weeks without a warm shower. When I came back, I will never take advantage of not having, just the shower, just little things like that made me realize how lucky we are and
Yes.
how fortunate we
Spoiled.
are. Yeah, that we're spoiled. And those were the little things that really made a big difference. And the silence, the retreat for 11 days, there were over 100 people and it was a true monastery that started. And it was very difficult when you have to stay with your own thoughts and you can't read or write, and you're up doing yoga meditation from 4 a.m. till the evening. It's amazing what happens to your brain. And, so a lot of people couldn't deal
Yeah,
with it.
not everybody makes it. Probably less than, I mean, in the ones groups I've been to being trained by the South Koreans, probably 50% almost ran screaming out if they could make any noise after a day and a half.
Exactly. And so there are about 33 of us that actually stuck it through, and that was life changing. Spending time in India, I went to I was going to volunteer at one of the colonies for Mother Teresa, who's my idol of all time.
Yes.
And she was alive at the time. I actually met her, and then I got really sick because I had chai tea and the water was out of the Ganges River and I didn't know. And so I was really sick. So I never made it there, but she's always been my idol. And what she accomplished in her life for people is something that I feel like I just admired her so much for her work. And I feel like I'm in a small way doing that for horses here at Equine Voices. So just a lot of different experiences that are imprinted in my thoughts, in my brain, and my, for a lifetime. And that really got me to saying money isn't everything. And I think having a purpose in life is really, for me, more important than materialism or selfishness or, those types of things.
Growth over comfort is
Yes.
is my motto. And I love Mother Teresa. I've never met her. My favorite quote attributed to her would be, not to judge anybody. If the minute you judge them, you lose all ability to influence them. And that's really stuck with me in my own personal development. So backpacking around and doing the remarkable, I had no idea things that you've done. You developed a sense of being present and awareness and truly being present. I'd like to ask you how do you feel about, I hear this sentence a lot from people who travel and they sit at my dinner table or on podcasts, or I might meet them somewhere, like some friends I met in Sedona on vacation last week. And they say to me, I'm amazed. And this always blows me away. It frightens me. They say, I'm amazed at how much unused land there is in the world and how much unlimited resources there are. Tell me what you think about that, Karen, those statements.
I guess I need a little more clarification on that. Do you mean that people look at the fact that we have unlimited resources and so we're kind of using all the resources that we have, or what specifically?
When I hear somebody say, and I've heard this many times, I was amazed, Raphael, at how much unused land they are.
Oh.
I always say, oh, please, no, it's not unused. It's being used by the millions of other species. Please leave it alone. It is the circle of life that created this beautiful environment that we live in. And so when I see one thing that always bugs me about people who say they own horses as opposed to they might use the term we love horses, is they keep them in tiny corrals for life. We have a mare we just rescued who's very bad navicular. She had foundered, and they're kept her in a tiny corral on the side of a house for 3 years, giving her alfalfa. And of course, her her laminitis was getting worse and worse. And so now the horses that we bring here, we feed them in the corral, but then we turn them out and they have about 32 acres to run around in the trees and just be horses.
Right.
We won't keep one horse, and we're not horse jailers.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I'm looking at being mindful to the other species and the fact that they helped create this environment that we call nature.
I agree. And so like where I live, I've been here 20 years and I started with 5 acres. Now we have 25 acres. It's not a big ranch, but we have about 62 equines here, but in the area, Green Valley, there's so much building that's happening all the way down the 19, which is the main corridor from Tucson to Nogales, Mexico. And the houses are cookie cutters and they're on top of each other. And all I see are dead animals on the side of the road. It tortures me because I feel like, yes, I can look at the mountains from my office, but we're encroaching on their land. And it's just heartbreaking to me. And I think the people that are not aware aren't realizing what we're doing to Mother Earth. I really feel like Mother Earth is suffering. Arizona, there's no recycling programs. I mean, this is ridiculous.
It is kind of weird, isn't it? That they
It's terrible.
I don't see any recycling bins. And I go out in the desert and I see hunters and I'm sorry I'm being so negative, but it's being mindfulness of the other species is so important. in my view, in my opinion, about the eventual survival of humanity. Last week, Neil Walsh was talking about all the he was talking about the 10,000 people a day who die from starvation, and immediately I was looking at the perspective of, if they didn't, in this overpopulated world, do you realize how overrun we would be? I go out in the fields and the hills here and I see people on horseback with rifles, and I ask them, why are you packing? And they say, oh, we have an elk license. And I go, and they say, where are all the elk? I say, well, you've killed them all. You've either hit them with cars or you've shot them. And this woman actually told me a couple of months ago, late last year, she said, well, actually, she said, elk are an invasive species. And she goes, they're an invasive species. And I go, I'm sorry, are you talking about elk or humanity?
Yeah.
And my neighbors say the deer are becoming a real problem around here. And I tell her, well, 200 years ago, that's what the deer told me, is that humanity is becoming a real problem around here. They're shooting us, they're putting up fences. So I really appreciate, wow, you've got over 60 horses. And when I first asked you about some advice about doing a small rescue as we do, and I noticed you're a rescue in a sanctuary, which implies that you keep many horses, but you also rehome horses, right?
On a smaller scale these days, because of our population, our Mustangs are wild. And going back to the land issue, I can speak to that. And we have a lot of older horses that are in their late 20s or 30s. And most people, they want horses that I get phone calls every day. I can't ride my horse, so I can't afford to feed them. And I'm like, okay, where's the commitment? Because for me,
Yeah, yeah,
when you
that's
take on
good.
an animal, it's a lifetime commitment, and so I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying that's just my philosophy. But take the wild horse issue, for instance. In 1971, Wild Horse Annie single-handedly had a law passed on a federal level to protect wild horses and burros. There were over 300 herd management areas, they call them HMAs, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres that were set aside for the wild horses to be able to live on. There are less, I think there's a little over 100 now, because our government keeps taking the land away from the Mustangs. They chase them down with helicopters. Now they're doubling the helicopter roundups. The babies are separated from their families. I have a Mustang here that is a BLM Mustang. He has the brand. He was abandoned. We rescued him about 2 weeks ago. He just got gelded. He was a stallion. And I did an animal communication class with my animal communicator. And he told her that he was rounded up when he was 4 months old, separated from his mom, and left in this holding pen. And so that's what they do. They take the stallions from the mares, from the babies, and it's, in my opinion, a Holocaust. And so what's happening is the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, who is responsible for managing these lands, are taking the lands away from these wild horses. And it's a fallacy to say there's not enough land or they can't get to water. It's the ranchers. It's because cattle
Yes,
make money because people eat meat. Horses don't. Wild horses don't. They're being rounded up by the droves and they're being sent to slaughter at night, and the meat's going abroad for human consumption.
right.
And so many people don't know this, but their land is being taken away from them. And there is a vaccine that you can give to the mares. It's a PZP vaccine that is 98% effective. So the horses can stay in their herd dynamics and make it a viable dynamic, because and they don't get pregnant, maybe a baby here and there, but not, but that's been out since the 80s. And
ABC.
so that's not the issue. The issue is they want the horses off the lands because they want to graze cattle.
Right. And sorry, Milo across the street, I'm not a big fan of ranchers and cow herding because I've seen what they've done to Arizona. I mean, an obvious factor of that would be the washes. I was told, I work with geologists and archaeologists doing documentaries and television and whatnot. And I just went hiking with an archaeologist yesterday. And we're talking about how the washes here, if you look at the soil breakdown, they've only been around for I'm guessing now about 160 years when we started herding cattle because of possibly because of overgrazing has caused the erosion and washes that we have. And I'm seeing it really go ballistic now. I mean, they're cutting off more and more land, giving the ranchers control over the land. Now, as you may know, in the White Mountains of Arizona, we're by Concho, Arizona, a little micro ranch, and we're surrounded by all the tribal reservations. My wife Brenda, she's Dene. We call them Navajo. They call them Dene and Zuni. But we have a lot of wild horses here, and they're in the wild. But I'm seeing them more and more being pushed off BLM land and federal land onto the reservations where there may be less trees and less water in certain areas, definitely in the north, around the Hopi and the Dene. But I'm seeing the complaints about overgrazing, and they're blaming the wild horses, but they're turning the cattle onto it. So,
Right.
and we're not really, I mean, it's not about being negative and complaining here. What we're doing is sticking up for the other species who are very important in my understanding about the food chain, which created this beautiful thing we call nature, right?
Yeah.
And and there are people who say we're not really destroying the earth, but we're destroying the environment. And there's I mean there's a lot of factors out there. There's a lot of organizations, groups. There's a very popular church group which I've literally heard them say, and they travel around the world and give speeches that good parents need to have as many children as possible. Well, that's exactly what good parents don't do. You know,
Right.
and I'm talking about overpopulation, and they're blaming the wild horses. We used to have, I'm looking out over my fields down below the house here, and there's a nice lake across. It's so beautiful here. I've got the White Mountains spread out in front of me. We used to have antelope, wild horses, elk, coyote. Now, I'm used to saying coyote because of my associations, but now when I go out in the desert, I literally see piles of dead coyote that have been skinned. And even one of our dogs was hit out by the highway and skinned because she kind of looked like a coyote. And in northern Arizona, anyway, the coyote is extremely beautiful animals. They're very beautiful dogs, and they're considered a varmint here in Arizona. Um, I used to own one of the local newspapers, and when I put a article about slaughtering the animals up here, the response I got, well, coyotes are considered a varmint, and there's no laws against shooting them, and all that. And yeah, I literally see all kinds of animals on the highway. So congratulations for your 20th year, Karen.
Thank
And
you.
where do you see Equine Voices going? Oh, wait a minute. I have a question for you. I'm sure I'd love to share with everybody. What are those voices saying, Karen, at Equine Voices?
Well, there are many, many whispers, especially in the evening under the full moon. I can tell you stories of just how they communicate with me.
Mhm.
I'll tell you a quick story. The Mustangs, when we first rescued them a few years ago, the first group, I had them in the arena, and this was before I expanded, and that now they have a 10-acre habitat. And they were wild, and I thought, oh my gosh, they can't live in this arena. It's a 90 by 180 arena. It's too small. They're used to being on thousands of acres.
Mhm.
So there was a woman, and I don't really recall how we got in touch with each other, but she lives towards the border, and I was thinking about sending them to her because she had more property. Well, long story short, I went out one evening and I sat in the middle of the arena, and it was under the full moon, and it makes me almost want to weep. They all circled me. Every single one of the wild horses circled me. I was in the middle. They could have trampled me, but they didn't. And I heard, "Don't send us." don't send us. That's what I heard. And I found out later she was a killer buyer. I found out later she sends horses to slaughter. And I heard that night, and I can tell tell you so many stories, but that's one that it was so profound. And so, yeah, they do talk if we're willing to listen.
Yes.
And it's not just through body language, but intuitively. And that's my mission here, is to listen to them, because we're here for them. Equine Voices is here for the horses. And if we have an open heart and an open mind, and we listen to what they have to say, we can have magical relationships with them and amazing experiences. I mean, horses built our country.
Yes,
Done so much for mankind, more than any animal out there, and what's happening to them is a disgrace. It's awful. So
an article I wrote that ended up on several newspapers was about the United States was built by horses before cars. I love to tell this story. My viewers have heard this several times. Of one day I walked down after we took in some horses. They were very well taken care of, but the woman lost the land, and we took care of them. There's Judy and Raven and Laddie, and I'm walking down the hill. And Karen, we have horses here because they're to me, they're the most spiritual animals there are, and they talk to me, and I love them so much. And Windhorse Garden is empty without them. It's imbalanced without the horse spirit. I'm walking down the hill, and I've got a lot on my head, as Neil Walsh would say, "Get out of your head." And I'm walking down the hill, and Judy Horse looks up at me and says, "Who's he showing up today as?" And Raven looks up from the feed bin with hay dripping out of his mouth, and he says, "Don't bring that shit down here with you." And then in the back, Laddie's my favorite. He's standing there just looking at me calmly. And he says, "The only moment is now. You need to be here." Thank you for sharing that with us about don't send us. They were speaking to you, and they literally speak to us if we open up and be present. So thank you. Thank you what you do so much. My clock's got to be wrong. It's not 10:30, is it?
It's 10:31.
Oh my goodness. I guess when you come back from vacation, when you've been traveling, your computer and your cell phone and your home says sometimes a couple of different times.
Right.
So where do you see yourself going with Equine Voices? And by the way, folks, you can reach Karen and you can make donations right at equinevoice.org, and you can also find adoptions. Where do you see Equine Voices Rescue and Sanctuary going, Karen, in the future?
Well, I'd like to expand the land base, because we receive phone calls, every single day, and there's only so much I can do. When I started Equine Voices, I realized right at the beginning that I can't save them all. It's sort of like that starfish story. The little boy, do you know that story? The little boy.
No.
So a little boy and his father were walking along the beach, and all these starfish washed up on the shore. And the little boy picked one up and threw it in the water, and then picked another one up and threw it in the water. And his father said to him, "Son, what are you doing? You can't save them all." Oh, gives me chills. And he picked up another one and he threw it in the water and said, "But I saved that one." And so that's, sort of my philosophy. But if we can raise more money to expand the land base, I would love to find a ranch that has pasture, so the horses can be on pasture. I mean, we have a beautiful facility here, but we have to pay for all the hay. Everything's, we have to pay for, so we don't have pasture. That would be ideal, and giving more land especially for the Mustangs, because I feel like, we've taken their land away from them. They're happy, but it would be wonderful to give them more room.
Bigger life, yeah.
Yeah, for them, for their happiness. I do want to mention we are having an event in November 8th at Casino del Sol up in Tucson. It's a beautiful resort, and it's celebrating our 20th year anniversary and commemorating Gulliver and the original foundation herd. And all that information is on our website at equinevoices.org.
Okay, November 8th.
November
Casino
8th.
del Sol. Where is that?
That's up in Tucson off of Valencia.
In Tucson, okay.
Beautiful resort. It's blue, black, and boots gala. So it's going to be like a higher end, sort of westerny theme, but you know, people can dress up or wear jeans and a nice sport coat or whatever. We'll have a silent auction, a live auction. We have a live band, and then of course it'll be a sit-down dinner. And it's our biggest fundraiser of the year. So I encourage people to join us because it's going to be great. And they are having a special room rate for us at the casino. So if people want to spend the night. So that's November 8th. And so people can support us that way, or even just send in a donation.
Right.
We are strictly run by donations. We don't get any government funding, anything like that. So.
And I remember back in Idaho when I was living in Idaho out of Boise, and when the gentleman who invented the French fry and sold it to, for the life of me, I can't remember his name, and that's okay, and sold it to McDonald's, he sold off his hay fields. And so we watched about 24 miles of hayfield go up to my little townhouse until I stuck my head out the bathroom window one day, and the neighbor yelled, "Get off my property." I mean, I'm just saying they started building all these housing communities. And I watched the price of hay, which was, like it was $2.95 a bale, guaranteed no Timothy. Within that year, it went up to $10 a bale. Now it's 20. It's exceedingly expensive to take care of equine. And I was just blown away when I said I spent over 7,000 of our personal money and not what people were paying to board their horses in need. And then you told me what you were paying a month. I was just so shocked. And so, yeah, you need all the help you can get that. And by the way, folks who don't live in Arizona, we really don't have grass here. In spring, it's so beautiful in the White Mountains because it looks like grass, but it's weeds. It looks beautiful, but it's really not grass. And you got to be careful in the spring, right? Because there's so much protein. If you have a horse that's been foundering or, suffering from laminitis, then you got to be careful what you feed it. As far as grazing. And so you feed of course, you have to feed all your horses. They're not eating grass. This is not Washington. And you're looking for more land too. So you're looking for more land, and you definitely could use some donations to save the horses. What else, Karen, do you see?
Well, yeah, and going back to feed costs, I mean, just like we know in the grocery stores, everything is doubled. It's insane how expensive everything is. A third of our herd are in their mid to late 20s and over that. So they're all on special supplements. And what would cost for a bag of feed, let's say Lake and Light, which is like a Bermuda alfalfa mix, pellets, was maybe $18 a year and a half ago. It was almost $30 a bag.
Yeah.
And so staples like that, like the items that we use that are consumable are really helpful. People can go online and, through Amazon or Tractor Supply and donate like fly, SWAT for fly predators, for the fly control, things like that. If people don't necessarily want to donate, cash, there's always those things that we need help with. As far as the future of Equine Voices, I just want to not leave a legacy for my own self, but leave a legacy for the horses and set it up, and we're on our way to doing that, set it up for long-term perpetuity. So the horses always have a place to be, even after I'm gone. So
and after all the cars and oil production is gone, folks, you're going to really appreciate a horse.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking ahead there. I'd like to point out something about horses' age. And I'm sure you would know a lot more about this. I'd really like your perspective on it. We took in a horse, their local rescue that we worked with several animals. We took in a horse that was basically almost confiscated because of its abuse that I was telling you about with the navicular problems. And I get laminitis and navicular mixed up. But
Mhm.
basically, his coffin bone has turned, and she can barely walk, and she's getting a lot better because we've got her a good farrier. We changed her diet and her habits. But she was introduced to me by the owners, which were basically drug addicts, and they said she's really old mare. She's like 21. I'm like, wow, you think that's old? I'm thinking of Sir Archibald, right? Sir Archibald, I believe, I forget when he lived, but he was 65, 66, 67 years old. He's one of the oldest equine on record. And what I'm seeing is people who are not exercising their horse daily or feeding it pure alfalfa. And we're having, I see a reduced lifespan over the years and other problems, of course. What's your view on that?
Well, I agree. I think it's a death sentence to have a horse in a stall without being able to move. Out in the wild, horses can travel up to 30 miles a day if there aren't fences blocking them and that sort of thing. So they're meant to move. They're meant, they say that a horse has five hearts, five heartbeats, four in the hooves, one in each foot, and then the heart. And everything that they eat goes straight to their feet, and that's the blood flow and everything. And so it's crucial to pay attention to what you're feeding them, especially the older guys. My horse that I had to put down a couple years ago, he was my love. He had all kinds of problems, but we would soak his hay. He was on such a special diet. He couldn't have alfalfa.
Mhm.
We'd never feed him sweet feed, so I think with the care of the veterinarian and even holistic practices, there's so much information out there to really, how do I want to say this? It's the care of the whole animal, which means movement, which means diet, just like us as
Mhm.
humans.
Yeah,
Um,
folks, that applies to you too. As a health coach for years, when I left television, a nutritionist, one of the hardest things that I can get people to do is get up, move, get movement. And the South Koreans taught me that the more movement you get, the more energy and reproduction of cells you're going to grow. So I go to town, I see horses in tiny stalls, and it just breaks my heart
mhm,
that they have to stay there. So they
mhm.
need movement is very important and proper diet. Do you see the horse's age being reduced over the last decades?
I think it has a lot to do with probably their care. I mean, our oldest horse that we had that passed, he couldn't get up at one point that last day, and we tried for about 6 hours to get him up. He was 45.
Uh-huh.
He was a horse that was an old ranch horse that was abandoned in the Dragoon Mountains, and we ended up taking him. We've had a lot of horses in our care that have lived into their 30s. Sometimes we can't prevent or help horses that have gotten to us when it's too late, which is, I've only lost a couple in the 20 years because we really have a pretty decent regimen here. I don't know how to answer that question. I just know that the horses here have a pretty long life because of the way we care for them.
Right.
And I think, if anything, we do everything we can to give them that chance of living a longer life, no matter how they come to us. So I think there's a combination. I think everything we're talking about, movement, diet,
Mhm.
exercise, love, they're sentient beings. They need that love. They I don't know, they feel it. And I think that's really important too, as part of the whole package.
Less stress. Boy, it
Exactly.
sounds so much like humans.
Hmm.
Exercise, diet, less stress, love. Oh my gosh. They're such beautiful creatures. Yeah, the woman next door who's lived here all her life, she used to train horses. She's in the 40 acres behind us, and her horses passed last year. they've been together for many decades, and they were 47 and 53.
Wow.
They have room to roam, and they only ate Bermuda and no molasses and no no alfalfa because they weren't really working them.
Mm-hmm.
So now I know from being around, one of my exes was a rodeo star, and
Mm-hmm.
her philosophy was you do not feed a horse alfalfa if you're not working it
Mm-hmm.
every day because that protein is just like us eating ice cream and liver pate. We're going to break down very quickly. So care for the horses is so and so important, and I don't see that happening. We feed our horses Bermuda, and the seniors we're careful about how many pellets we give them, especially if they have what do you call that condition where the P3, the coffin bone, rotates? Is that laminitis or navicular?
Oh, no, that's a founder. Well, it starts with, usually it starts with the laminitis, and what happens is you have the hoof, and so you have the outside of the hoof, and then you have lamina, which is the flesh, and
Yeah.
then you have the coffin bone. And so when they start getting laminitis, what happens is that lamina starts separating from the actual coffin bone. And it's a very difficult thing to treat, but if you don't treat it through diet mostly, then what happens is that coffin bone, which is the structure of their entire leg, and their hoof, separates, and then it starts rotating because it doesn't have anything to adhere to. And
Yeah.
then it pushes through the hoof wall at the bottom, and it's very not only painful, it's at that point it's almost impossible to treat.
And this poor horse, with the severe laminitis, they were literally, when they rode it, and they put their children on it. She's such a sweet, trusting mare, but they were literally riding it on pavement with
Wow.
regular shoes. And so
Wow.
by the time people in the community were, speaking out and talking to the police and everything about this poor horse, she's pretty well bed, but we've got a great farrier. It really helps to have a good farrier, right? And at
Yeah.
first they turned the shoe around backwards, and then we did the epoxy and the pad, and then we're going to do a bar shoe. And she's getting better, and she's walking out into the field with this very rambunctious pony that we need to rehome because when she's ovulating, even though he's a gelding, I think he's proud cut, and we don't want him to hurt her. He's been
Mm-hmm.
jumping on her and shaking her tail with his teeth and being a little too. You know how ponies are? They're like donkeys. They're so aggressive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're homing him to Carol Windsor at Running Free Equine Sanctuary across the highway. Karen knows you. She corrected me on your name.
Oh.
but and we're getting another that was introduced to us as a donation as a 21-year old. He says it's pretty up there in age. He's like 21 years old. I'm like, oh wow, hearing it again. But he's coming for a good pasture pal for her. All that's really important to us is that we let horses be horses and they
Mm-hmm.
run free. And our last farrier, he made a comment. He said, horses are service animals. They're not happy unless they're serving you. And I'm like, wow, where did you get that from? I guess that comes from the we have dominion over the other species lie that has been told by
Mm-hmm.
the different religions. But anyway, off that, we just care about the horses. We care about the other species. And Karen, guess what? We rescue animals, and one of the animals that we rescued, a friend of ours that we were trying to help out, a young lady, she got a job at the post office and she was killed on the highway. We had to go out in the high desert north of us, and I'm really good at catching animals. I caught 27 animals, different species. But then I went out in the field and there were these refrigerators laying there, and I looked in there and they were full of, it was a worm farm. So we rescue worms, and now
Oh
we
my
have a
gosh.
worm farm.
Oh my gosh.
Now the Buddhists would love that, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But they make this wonderful dirt, and we kind of like Hugo culture. We add all the chicken scraps, all the food that people throw away, and we're mostly vegetarians. Peter Sage talked me into eating meat again. So I eat grass fed. And, listening to you, I was thinking, well, maybe I should quit and be a vegetarian again. Because I really don't want to support that. But anyway, so we have a worm farm and we use the table scraps to feed it and water it. And we use like coffee grounds for all those people that pay, $6, $7 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. We get the bags of coffee and we make this worm farm and they produce the most beautiful soil.
Wow.
And so for all we have a lot of people moving in. The population is pretty much doubled up here recently. It looks like to me by the lights at night, people off grid. I think they call them people who think who are living in fear and not faith and think things are going to go kind of wild. They call preppers. Yeah, preparing. And this is just a heads up that all the other species serve to create our environment and the food chain. If you don't, if you're not producing, if you're not contributing to the food chain, you're usually taken out. For example, I doubt that a lot of old horses in the wild died of old age. They probably turned into cat food. Right.
Yeah.
Horses don't like cats because they can jump on them. And they don't have a problem with wolves because they can kick them. I learned that in my ranch up in Montana. I saw one of our horses chasing some really big wolves, scary looking animals. Wasn't afraid of them, but so when I come up to a horse, I was taught to go like that. That's a horse nose, to say hi to it instead of that's a cat paw.
Right. Well, they're prey animals, where big cats are predators. And so, primarily, you probably know this, is that it's the way your eyes are set. So we're predators. Our eyes are set in front, and horses' eyes are set in the side of their heads. And that's how you can kind of tell the difference between different animals, is who's prey, who's predator, is how their eyes are set. So it's kind of interesting.
So you look out for those ranchers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
gosh, thank you so much. And I just want to reiterate that people can get a hold of you, and I'll put that in the description at equinevoices.org. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
.org, and you can make contributions. You can look at horses like Eclipse that are being you can adopt a horse. Under Eclipse, it says it's male, but it keeps referring to in the description as she. And I know I've got assistants too. Is Eclipse a male or a
He's
female?
a male, and
Okay.
at first I thought he was a female. He was just born, and in fact, I'll have to correct that. I didn't realize that's an error. But he is a little boy, and he was born under the eclipse moon 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks, well, 2 weeks and 2 days ago. And he's Gigi's his mom, and she was a wild Mustang that was rounded up, and she came in with another wild horse that has a severe injury to her eye, and we didn't realize she was pregnant. And next, we just saw her belly grow. And yeah, he was born under the eclipse moon, so we named him Eclipse. So, but he's a boy for sure.
And this pony that we took in, and basically, you're right, Karen. The horses that we take in are basically horses that people stop having a use for. They no longer use them, and they don't want to pay them. They say, "I got to pay my propane bill. I can't afford this horse." So there's the commitment issue. But the pony that we took in has got a blue eye, and I wasn't told this. And we took him in as a pasture pal, but when I brought him in, he can sense light, but I noticed he's fairly blind in the right eye. But he still loves to run, and they had him a little crowd, but he runs in a big left-hand circle because he can't see out the right eye. So he's just out there in the field. He loves to run, and you can ride him. You can hop right on him, but you better learn to turn him in case he takes off. But yeah, we take in injured horses, but we only have a couple at a time. And we either find a good home for them. And I urge people to, like you were saying, to examine. And I was taught this by the local rescue. but it's to examine the home where the animal is going, because
Yes.
people lie a lot about what they are dealing with animals and where they're going, and maybe take a look at their background if they have any complaints with the local authorities for abusing animals, because we've had some trouble with that, with people who have gotten dogs and things. So is there anywhere else people can go? You've got the in closing, you've got the event on November 8th. So we have a lot of time to prep and let people know about that. Carina del Sol in Tucson.
Yeah,
And
Casino del Sol.
yeah,
Mhm.
casino, right?
Yep.
Casino. And they can reach you at equinevoices.org. Is there any other way we can help you support the equine, Karen?
Oh, thank you. Well, if people are interested in staying in touch with what we're doing, we have a Facebook page. It's Equine Voices Rescue and Sanctuary.
Right.
We have videos on YouTube, and let's see, our newsletter is really good. We send out, it's an email newsletter, it's twice a month. And people can just go on the website and it'll give you a pop-up menu. And you just put your first name and last name and then your email address, and it kind of keeps people informed of, what the happenings are here at the ranch. So those are really the main channels of communication. But the newsletter is fantastic, and it's usually very informative, and it keeps people, in the loop on what we're doing here.
Excellent. So we can go to equinevoices.org and you have a pop-up where we can join your newsletter and get more information what's going on with the horses and how they can help out if they chose to.
Yes. And then the other thought too, for the event on November 8th, we are looking for sponsorships. If a business is out there that would like to sponsor us, we have different levels, and for each level that business will get, we do a lot of promotion through our Facebook page, our newsletter, our website. Depending on the level, the highest level, we're offering 8 tickets for the event, so for dinner. So that's a nice little perk. And we really do, our philosophy is it's a give and take philosophy. We believe if people help us, we help them in return. So if there's any business out there that would like to help us help promote and they'd like to sponsor us, it's a win-win. And then we also look for donations for the silent auction and the live auction. So that's another way that people can help us.
Silent auction and live auction, is that a continuing event then?
That's for November 8th.
Oh, okay.
So people can donate items or gift certificates or trips, depending, we usually have about 8 items in the live auction. And then we have a couple hundred items in the silent auction, so people can donate items, anything from pottery to jewelry to artwork, gift certificates, things like that. Yeah.
I like that perspective of helping people that can help you. I need to be more aware of that in my life. I tend to help people a lot, and one of the worst case scenarios some coaches might say is they warn you not to help people who won't help themselves. For example, somebody standing on the side of the road smoking and begging for money. It's like, no, I don't smoke. I'm not going to contribute to your drug habit. Okay, there you go. I had to throw that in. So I love helping people. This guy who's donating the 21-year-old gelding to us to be a pasture pal for Molly, because that's another thing is don't leave horses alone. They're herd animals. I hate to see a horse by itself.
Yeah.
With ABC, I've interviewed a lot of abductees, very popular in Arizona. It's UFOs. I've seen many of them up close, even the US ones in my corporate life. But is sorry, I get sidetracked and I go on these rabbit trails. But they are herd animals, and I hate seeing horses left alone. And I've interviewed people who tell stories about being abducted. And I think about how would you like to be a human and taken by another species and left with nobody to talk to? I can't talk to Karen anymore because she didn't get abducted. Well, that's what happens to horses. They're abducted and they're put in a tiny corral, sometimes on the side of a house in town, and left there for years by themselves. And that breaks my heart.
It does, yeah.
It's just wrong. And those people cannot tell me that they love horses. Do you love your children? Would you do that to them?
Right. Yeah.
Lock them up. So I'm sure you never heard this before, Karen. It's probably your first time, but thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank
Yay.
you.
And please let me know and let us all know how we can support you in the future, moving ahead.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on your show today. It's been a privilege and an honor, and I appreciate so much your time and helping to spread the word out there about what our work is and how we're helping the animals. So thank you.
Ditto. And yeah, and I will put that information in the description and comments below. And hopefully I'll see you again on Brenda and I would love to visit you sometime, Karen.
You have an open invitation. We also have a guest house here. You're welcome to come and spend the night and enjoy the sanctuary anytime,
Oh,
anytime.
that would be wonderful. Now you're south of Tucson, right? You're west of Tucson.
South, pretty much south of Tucson. We're between Tucson and Nogales, Mexico. So we're in a town
Oh,
called Amado, just a tad south of Green Valley.
oh, okay. Come on. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Darren. I'll see you again.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.